Jesus start to teach in parables. All the groups of preachers and teachers had returned on March 10th of the year 29 from the third preaching tour through Galilee, and they gathered around Zebedee's house in Bethsaida. Jesus had not fully recovered from the sorrow caused by his recent rejection in Nazareth. The apostles sensed an unusual sadness in him. Around this time, Jesus began using the method of parables in his teaching for the first time. One Sunday morning, when Jesus wanted to be alone for a while and had sat down in an old fishing boat, a large crowd soon came to him. Peter also arrived and asked Jesus, "Master, shall I speak to them?" But Jesus replied, "No, I will tell them a story." Jesus stood up, raised his hand, and when everyone was quiet, he began to tell a fictional story about a farmer who went out to sow. A farmer went out to sow, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and it was trampled on and eaten by birds. Some fell on rocky ground, where there was little soil. It sprang up quickly, but when the sun came up, it withered because it had no roots to retain moisture. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants so that it did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it grew and produced a crop, multiplying 30, 60, and even 100 times. When Jesus had finished, he said to the listeners, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." Even the apostles did not understand the purpose of this story, and after discussing it among themselves, Matthew asked Jesus that evening in Zebedee's garden, "Master, what is the meaning of the story you taught in public this morning? Why did you speak in a parable to those who seek the truth?" And Jesus replied, "I have patiently taught you all this time. You are given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to the curious people who listen without discernment, or to those who come to us for sensation or miracles, or to those who seek my downfall, I will henceforth offer the mysteries of the kingdom in the form of parables. Truth seekers who truly desire to enter the kingdom will listen to these stories with an open heart, and they will understand the hidden meaning and thus find salvation. While those who listen only to trap us will become more confused because they listen with a closed heart, in which there is no desire to unravel the truth. There is a spiritual law that says whoever has, will be given more, and they will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what they had will be taken from them. Through parables, we give treasures to those who have the key to unlock them. But those who listen with a dull spirit will not understand them. Those who desire to know the truth will find what they seek, while our enemies and those who do not love the truth will hear without understanding it. Many people are self-satisfied and have embraced their own truth. They are no longer seeking a higher truth. They do not follow the path of truth but choose to stay on their own narrow piece of fenced-off utopia. The prophet described these souls without insight with the words, "For the heart of this people has become dull, their ears are hard of hearing, and they have closed their eyes to avoid seeing the truth and understanding it in their hearts." The apostles felt uncomfortable because they were also not sure they understood the meaning of the parable of the sower. Peter approached Jesus and said, "But we are also unable to comprehend the meaning of this parable, and we would like you to explain it to us. For you say, it is given to us to know the mysteries of the kingdom." When Jesus heard this, he said to Peter, "I will not withhold anything from you, but tell me first what you think. What is your interpretation of this parable?" Peter answered somewhat uncomfortably, "Master, we have discussed this parable among ourselves during the day, and this is the interpretation I have come to. The sower is the preacher of the gospel, the seed is the word of God. The seed that fell along the path represents those who do not understand the teaching of the gospel. The bird that came to eat the seed represents the devil, who deceitfully takes away what was sown in the hearts of these ignorant ones. The seed that fell on rocky ground and sprang up quickly represents superficial, thoughtless people who, when they hear the good news, receive it with joy. But because the truth has not really taken root in their deeper existence, their devotion is short-lived when they face trials. When difficulties come, these believers stumble, they fall away when they are tempted. The seed that fell among the thorns represents those who willingly hear the word but allow the worries of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth to choke the word of truth so that it becomes unfruitful. The seed that fell on good soil and grew, producing a crop of 30, 60, and even 100 times, represents those who, when they have heard the word of truth, understand it intellectually. Each according to their different intellectual gifts, and for this reason, these different amounts of fruit are produced. When Jesus had heard Peter's explanation, he asked the other apostles if they had come to a different interpretation. Only Nathanael responded to this invitation. He said, "My thought on this parable is, the seed represents the gospel of the kingdom, while the sower stands for the messengers of the kingdom. The seed that fell along the path on hardened ground represents those who have heard little of the gospel, along with those who are indifferent to the message and have hardened their hearts. The birds that came and ate the seed that fell along the path represent the temptations of evil and the desires of the flesh. The seed that fell on rocky ground represents the lightly stirred souls who can quickly adopt new teachings but just as quickly let them go when confronted with the difficulties and realities that make it hard to align their lives with this truth. They lack spiritual insight. The seed that fell among the thorns represents those who are attracted to the truths of the gospel and intend to follow the teaching of the gospel but are prevented from doing so by the pride in their lives, by jealousy, envy, and the cares of earthly existence. The seed that fell on good soil and grew, producing a crop of 30, 60, and even 100 times, represents the natural ability to comprehend the truth and how to respond to these spiritual teachings. When Nathanael had finished, the apostles and their companions engaged in a serious discussion, with some agreeing with Peter's interpretation while about the same number tried to defend Nathanael's explanation. Meanwhile, Peter and Nathanael had gone inside, where they heatedly and determinedly tried to convince each other and change each other's minds. Jesus let this confusion continue until it reached its peak. Then he clapped his hands and called everyone to him. When they had all gathered around him, he said, "Does anyone have anything to say before I explain this parable?" After a moment of silence, Thomas spoke up. "Yes, Master, I remember that you have clearly warned us several times to be cautious about this. You have taught us that when we use examples in our preaching, we should use true stories, not fables, and that we should choose a story that best illuminates the truth we want to teach the people. Once we have used the story, we should not try to find a spiritual application for all the minor details involved in telling the story." I believe that both Peter and Nathanael are wrong in their attempts to explain all these details. I admire their ability to come up with such explanations, but I am equally sure that if 5 of us give our interpretation of this parable at the detail level, we will end up with 5 different explanations. This can only lead to confusion, and it will overshadow the true message of the story. That I am right is already proven by the fact that we, who all thought the same an hour ago, are now divided into 2 separate groups with different opinions about one and the same parable. We all take our own opinions so seriously that they hinder our ability to grasp the great truth you had in mind. Thomas's words had a calming effect on everyone. They now remembered what Jesus had taught them on previous occasions. Before Jesus spoke again, Andrew stood up and said, "Now I am curious what meaning Thomas ascribes to the parable of the sower." Thomas replied, "Brothers, I think this parable is trying to teach us one great truth. And that truth is that our teaching of the gospel of the kingdom, no matter how faithfully and efficiently we carry out our divine mission, will achieve varying degrees of success. All these different results are directly related to the conditions inherent in the circumstances in which we operate, conditions over which we have little or no control. Jesus stood up and said, "Well spoken, Thomas. You have understood the true purpose of parables. You see here how dangerous it is to attach fixed truths to metaphors, and how quickly differences of opinion arise, dividing you into two camps before you realize it. In your own creative thinking, you can come to insights through your imagination. And when you teach through metaphors, do not make the mistake of hiding the message of your conclusions in the details. Because the recipient will always interpret your metaphor based on their own experiences." Jesus continued, "Train yourself to vary your teaching so that you can reach the minds and intellects of those before you. However, when you stand before a crowd with people of different intellectual abilities, you cannot use different words for each type of listener, but you can tell a story to convey your teaching. And each individual will be able to give their own interpretation to your parable. Let the light shine, but do so with wisdom and tact. No one lights a lamp and covers it with a bowl or puts it under a bed, but they set it on a stand so that everyone benefits from the light. I tell you that nothing hidden in the kingdom of heaven will not be made public. There is no secret that will not eventually be revealed. In the end, everything will come to light. A parable reaches different levels of consciousness and spirit simultaneously. The form of a story stimulates the imagination, appeals to discernment, and prompts critical thinking. It fosters sympathy without arousing resistance. A parable begins with something familiar and leads to the discernment of the unknown. The story serves as a bridge between the material and the spiritual. Parables are conducive to making impartial moral decisions. A story avoids much prejudice and conveys new truth elegantly to the consciousness, doing so with minimal provocation to self-defense. A parable forces a person to think and consider. From this point on, Jesus taught many parables to his followers. Most of these parables began with a comparison: "The kingdom of heaven is like." Usually, after he had spoken to his audience in parables in public, he gave his apostles and disciples more detailed and clearer teachings during the evening lessons. Children of men, when you studying the parables of Jesus, seek the truth, or the wisdom in the story itself, and we encourage you, when you face a difficult situation, where multiple parties have their own interests, to have the courage to wrap your inspired wisdom in a story-like parable.